I never belonged in places like this. Crystal lights the clinking of glasses and smiles stitched together with golden thread. People laughed, but there was no light in their eyes. And I, Emma Brooks, was just an ordinary art teacher, lost in a gala full of people who could buy the sky if they wanted to. I would have escaped if Principal Morrison hadn't given me that "this is your duty" look. We need someone to speak about the children's art program, Emma. The sponsors are crucial. And that's how I ended up here in an old Manhattan hotel wearing a faded black dress and stiff flats. My heart beating wildly like it didn't belong to me. I told myself just survive 2 hours, then I could go home, sink into a hot bath, and forget the expensive perfume hanging in the air. But fate always loves to start with the most harmless moments. I touched the small necklace around my neck, a habit when I'm nervous. A simple silver chain with a scratched anchor pendant. I couldn't even remember the last time I took it off. It felt like part of my body, like breathing. Ms. Brooks. This is Mr. Richard Lang, a member of the Miller Foundation's board of sponsors. I smiled politely and shook his hand. He spoke kindly, asked about the children's art program I was running, about how art heals wounded souls. I answered like someone reciting a script while secretly longing to return to my quiet Brooklyn street. Then he said, "I'd like to introduce you to the director of the foundation, Ethan Miller. He makes most of the funding decisions." Young, but very serious. Before I could reply, he was already glancing toward the end of the room. That's when I saw him a shadow among the lights. A perfectly tailored black suit, broad shoulders, and effortless stance, radiating an aura that made others instinctively step aside. Dark brown hair neatly cut, and eyes, steel gray. That gaze cut through me sharp and cold as a blade. I couldn't look away, and I didn't even know why. Something about him made my heart falter, as if an old memory had brushed past my shoulder. "Ethan, this is Ms. Emma Brooks, an art teacher from Brooklyn Public. She leads the Art Heals project the foundation is considering." Ethan Miller gave a slight nod. "A pleasure to meet you." His voice was low, steady, the kind of authority that didn't need to raise its tone to silence a room. I smiled, steadying myself, and began to talk about crayons and small hands drawing their way back to joy. He listened quietly. Only his eyes moved, following every gesture, every breath. Then his gaze stopped at my neck. I flinched slightly. His fingers tightened around the wine glass, tilting it just a little. It all lasted mere seconds, yet felt infinite. "That necklace," he said softly. His voice wasn't loud, but it sent a chill down my spine. "Where did you get it?" I hesitated. "It's a gift. I've had it for a long time." From whom his eyes deepened. It felt as if he wasn't just looking at me, but threw me into the deepest corners of my memory. I clenched my hand and forced a smile. "I don't remember. Is something wrong?" Ethan didn't answer right away. He just looked for a long, long moment, then carefully set his glass down. "Nothing. It just looks exactly like something I once gave to someone very close to me." I nodded, searching for an excuse to leave, when he added so quietly, it almost felt like a whisper. "Someone who died 15 years ago." The world froze. The music, the laughter, the clinking glass all faded into a distant blur. 15 years ago. I gripped the pendant tight, my pulse sinking into a memory I thought I'd buried. Ethan's gaze didn't waver. It said one thing he knew, or at least suspected. "We'll meet again, Ms. Brooks." He turned away, leaving me in the middle of a glittering ballroom where I could no longer hear the music. Outside, the New York wind was so cold it burned my skin. I stood by the curb, breathing deep, convincing myself it was all coincidence. A stranger, a necklace, nothing more. But in the mirrored glass behind me, I saw my reflection, and beyond it, a black car parked across the street. Its headlights were off, but the engine was still running. It stayed there the whole time I hailed a cab. And when my taxi turned the corner, I caught a glimpse of the glow from a phone screen lighting up the face of a man inside him. Back in my small Brooklyn apartment, old but safe, I took off my coat, my shoes, and stared at my reflection. When did I start trembling over a single look I touched the necklace? Cold. So cold it brought back another night long ago in an abandoned warehouse outside Boston under the dim light of a hanging lamp. A brown-haired girl had grabbed my hand and whispered, "Don't say a word. Keep this. And promise me, you'll live." That voice, I thought I'd forgotten it, but tonight it returned so vividly it hurt. I opened the window and took a deep breath. Down below, the streetlights bled gold. The city never slept, and I, a woman carrying a secret no one knew. Then my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "Don't take that necklace off." I froze. No name, no sender, just 4 words. Outside, the night traffic kept moving, but inside me something had awakened. Half fear, half anticipation. I looked down at the silver anchor in my hand, the one I'd worn for 15 years without question. And for the first time, I wondered, was it ever truly mine? Some secrets never die until someone's eyes bring them back to life. If you've ever kept a promise from the past, stay tuned, because this is only the beginning. Part 2. The Man with the Ice-Cold Eyes, coming soon. 3 days had passed since the gala, yet his gaze still felt carved into my skin, cold, sharp, and painfully unforgettable. Every night I still heard his voice, someone who died 15 years ago. Each word poured lead into my sleep. My once peaceful Brooklyn apartment now felt suffocating. I still taught, still smiled at the children, still held a paintbrush in my hand, but every time the silver glint of the necklace caught my reflection in the mirror, my heart tightened. On the 3rd morning, as I stood before the easel, I realized something. That black car, it was still there, parked near the school exactly like the first time I saw it. Same model, same dark paint, same eerie stillness that made the back of my neck prickle. I told myself it was coincidence, but deep down, I knew there were no coincidences when it came to Ethan Miller. That afternoon, I left class early. A light drizzle veiled the streets, soaking the hem of my coat. When I turned my key in the lock, I froze. The door was slightly ajar. I was certain I'd locked it before leaving. My hand trembled as I pushed it open. Everything looked untouched, the paintings, the books, the vase of flowers. Yet something felt off. The air was too still, artificially still. Then his voice came from the shadows. I knocked 3 times. I spun around. He was sitting in the chair beside my desk. Posture, straight, fingers interlaced as if this place belonged to him. The warm glow of the desk lamp traced the sharp lines of his face, deepening the storm in those gray eyes. "What are you doing here?" I asked, forcing my voice to stay calm. "The right question," he said evenly, "is why you lied to me at the gala." I went silent. He stood each step slow, measured the distance between us closing like a tightening thread. "That necklace," he said quietly. "It's not just jewelry, it belonged to my sister." The air froze. I stepped back until my shoulders hit the wall. I don't know who she is." "Don't lie." His tone wasn't raised, but it carried weight enough to make me tremble. In his eyes, there wasn't just anger, there was grief. Deep, old, unhealed. "I've been searching for it for 15 years, Ethan continued. "And now I find it on your neck. You expect me to believe that's a coincidence?" I clenched my hands. It belonged to a little girl I once met. I didn't know her name, or her family. I only know that she died. Ethan froze. A silence fell between us, heavy and absolute. Then he took a step closer. "What did you say I was a child?" "Around 10. That night, I ran away from home and ended up in a warehouse in Red Hook. I saw her there. She was hurt. She gave me this necklace and told me to live." My voice shook. Each word tore through layers of memory, flashing lights, footsteps, the smell of gunpowder. "Did she say anything else?" "Just one thing." I inhaled deeply, closing my eyes. "Don't tell anyone. Promise me. You'll live." The room fell silent again. Only the rain outside spoke steady, relentless. When I opened my eyes, Ethan was still there. His gaze had changed. No longer cold, but the kind of storm that comes after years of being contained. "Her name was Ava," he said softly. "Ava Miller, my twin sister." I couldn't breathe. My throat closed. Part of me had already known. But hearing him say it, it felt like my heart was being crushed from the inside. Ethan turned away, his hand trembling slightly. I thought I'd never find another trace of her. The police said it was mistaken identity, that there were no witnesses. But if you're telling the truth, that means you were there. You saw everything. I was too young. I was scared. It's all right, he cut in gently, his tone unexpectedly soft. You're alive. That's what matters. He moved closer slowly now, no longer threatening. But you need to leave. Tonight. I blinked. Why? Because when I saw that necklace, others saw it too. And they won't let a witness live. My mind spun. What are you talking about? Who would the people who killed Ava? Those 3 words sliced through the air like a blade. I staggered back, heart pounding. Ethan's eyes no longer held the polished calm of a businessman, but the feral resolve of a man who'd already lost too much. I'll protect you, he said quietly. But you have to trust me. That night, I didn't sleep. Memories flooded back the warehouse, the screams, the blood, and her eyes the same gray as his. Just before dawn, a message came through. Be ready. I'm coming for you, no name. But I knew it was him. I packed a small suitcase, my pulse hammering as I opened the door. Outside, a black SUV waited. The passenger door opened. Ethan sat inside, silent. We left Brooklyn without a word. The city fell away behind us like a fading dream. Where are you taking me? I asked. Somewhere safe. My apartment in Midtown. No one will find you there. I can't hide forever. Not forever, he replied, eyes fixed on the road. Just until I find who killed Ava. His voice cut through the air, every word sharp, deliberate. But beneath it there was something else, a faint broken note pain disguised as control. The car crossed the Brooklyn Bridge, the lights glinting off the rearview mirror, and for a fleeting second, I saw his eyes no longer ice but something warmer, and far more dangerous. Emma, he murmured that night. Did you see anyone else, any faces? I hesitated, then shook my head. Not clearly, but they spoke Italian. And one man had a blue snake tattoo on his neck. Ethan's grip on the steering wheel tightened, veins rising along his knuckles. I know him. Just 3 words, but the air thickened instantly. I didn't ask more. His apartment sat atop a glass tower overlooking Central Park. Everything inside gleamed expensive, sterile. No flowers, no photos, just steel leather and silence. You can stay here, he said. There's security around the clock. Whatever you need, tell me. I looked around, searching for a trace of warmth in all that perfection. Do you live here alone? I'm used to it. He stopped, turning toward me. I thought finding Ava's killer would bring me peace, but when I saw you, all I felt was fear. Fear of what? Of losing someone else. For the first time, he didn't look like a mafia boss. He looked like a man clinging to the last fragile piece of his humanity. I stood by the window, watching rain trace the city lights. In the glass, his reflection lingered behind me, silent, distant. Between us stretched an invisible abyss of blood, past, and fear. Then he stepped closer. Just one step. Our breaths met. I don't want to scare you, he whispered. You don't, I replied softly, though I wasn't sure I believed it myself. He lowered his gaze to the necklace. Don't take it off. No matter what happens. Why? Because if they see you wearing it, they'll know who you are. And if I see it, I'll know where you are. His voice trembled barely, but enough to sound like a prayer. Outside, thunder rolled. Inside, something within me shifted, fragile, dangerous, and real. I knew I shouldn't trust him, but I also knew if I walked away now, I might never survive. So I stayed. In the cold penthouse of a man with eyes like ice eyes that had seen death, and now looked at me as if I were the only proof left that life still existed. I didn't know how long I'd slept in that unfamiliar room. When I opened my eyes, the morning light had already spilled through the white curtains, falling onto the ash-colored wooden floor. The apartment was too quiet, the kind of silence that doesn't belong to the ordinary world. No neighbors, no honking cars, only the soft hum of the air conditioner and the rhythm of my own breathing. On the nightstand sat a silver tray, a glass of water, a few painkillers, and a small note written in neat, firm handwriting. If you wake up and feel short of breath, take the pills. There's coffee in the kitchen. I had to take care of some things. E. The signature was sharp, almost cold, but below it a faint stroke of ink hinted that he had meant to write something else, and changed his mind. I exhaled slowly. For a fleeting moment, the apartment didn't feel like a cage, but a quiet limbo where I had to admit something I'd been denying. I trusted the man with the gray eyes more than I should. The living room was so wide that my footsteps echoed faintly. Everything was arranged with meticulous precision: leather sofas, a whiskey decanter, shelves lined with philosophy and political theory, and a grand piano by the window. There were no photographs, only one frame turned face down against the wall. Curiosity pulled me closer. I turned it over. An old photo, slightly faded, two twins around 9 years old, a boy and a girl, both smiling. The girl wore an anchor-shaped necklace. My heart clenched. She always wore it. From the day I gave it to her. Ethan's voice came from behind. I startled. He stood by the doorway, white shirt sleeves rolled up. Hair slightly tousled, eyes warmer than usual. "That girl," I whispered. "That's Ava, isn't it?" "Yes. Her 9th birthday. Just before everything fell apart." He stepped closer, light spilling across his face, silvering the edges of his gaze. "I never told anyone," he said quietly, "but Ava was the only reason I ever believed there was still humanity left in the Miller family. My father built his empire on blood. My mother stayed silent to survive. Only my sister still believed the world outside could be good." His voice was calm, too calm, but something in it was raw. So raw that I couldn't bring myself to interrupt. "You kept this photo all these years not to keep. To punish myself. Every time I look at it, I remember that I broke my promise." He sat down, resting his elbows on his knees. "I promised her I'd always protect her. But that night when I got the call, I was too late. The police wouldn't let me see her body. They said there was nothing left to identify her. Except the necklace." I could hear my own heartbeat echoing in the silence. "Did you ever think she might still be alive?" He shook his head, his eyes darkening. "No, but I always knew someone out there knew the truth. And then, you appeared." We stayed quiet for a long time. Outside, the rain began to fall, drops sliding down the glass like old timelines melting away. Ethan rose and poured 2 cups of coffee. He handed me one, sat across from me, eyes steady. "Emma, I need you to tell me everything about that night. Every detail, no matter how small." I nodded softly. "That night I ran away from home because my foster father was drunk. I only took a coat and my sketchbook. When I reached Red Hook, I found an old warehouse. The door was open. I went inside thinking I could sleep there. Then I heard cars pulling in. My voice trembled, but he stayed silent, listening. There were 3 men. One of them had silver hair, kind eyes, like he believed he was doing something right. He was carrying a little girl, Ava, and saying, 'Your father's waiting at a safe place.' But then more men came. They were angry. They spoke Italian. One of them had a blue snake tattoo on his neck. The coffee cup in Ethan's hand stopped midair. 'Blue snake,' he repeated. 'His name's Castor Vega, a hired gun for a Mexican cartel. He vanished after that night. I was hiding under a table. I saw the silver-haired man get shot. Ava ran, then fell. I didn't dare breathe. When they left, I went to her. She was still alive, barely. She took off the necklace, placed it in my hand, told me to live, and not tell anyone. Then, she stopped breathing." Ethan closed his eyes. A tear escaped, silent, unguarded, and hit the floor. "Franco," he murmured. "The man with silver hair. My father's closest friend. He saved me more times than I can count. I thought he betrayed us." I met his gaze. "You couldn't have known." "No," he said quietly, "but now I know what I have to do. If Vega killed Franco and Ava, he didn't act alone. Someone ordered it." He stood, his entire presence shifting, no longer a grieving brother, but the cold, calculating ruler of an empire. "I'll find him, and the one who hired him." "Ethan? I don't need the police. I don't need the law. I need the truth." A shiver ran through me, not just fear for myself this time, but for him, for the man who had learned to breathe only through vengeance. The rest of the day passed in heavy silence. By dusk, the rain had stopped. I sat in the living room as Ethan returned a thick envelope in hand. He set it on the table. I had someone look into Vega. Here's what we found. He used to work for Roberto Lang, vice president of Miller Financial. Wait, Roberto, you mean he was part of your father's organization? He was the man my father trusted most. Lightning flashed outside, slicing through the glass with white fire. In that light, Ethan's eyes looked carved from both fury and sorrow. Roberto taught me how to shoot, how to negotiate, how to survive. If he gave the order... He trailed off, unable to finish. I stepped closer and lightly touched his hand. Are you sure? Maybe it's just a coincidence? There are no coincidences in my world. His voice was rough, low, like something spoken from the bottom of a grave. After a moment, he said almost to himself, You kept Ava's promise, Emma. Now it's my turn to keep mine. What promise? That I'll protect you, no matter what happens. That night, sleep refused to come. Every sound made my heart jolt the wind, the elevator, even my own breathing. I stepped out onto the balcony. The city spread beneath me, lights flickering through the mist. Central Park a dark smudge amid the golden glow. The door opened softly behind me. Ethan came out wearing a thin coat, the chill clinging to his shoulders. He stood beside me without speaking. We both looked down at the endless stream of cars. Do you regret telling me? No, I said quietly. If I'd kept it inside any longer, I'd never sleep again. Neither would I. He turned to me. The wind swept a strand of hair across my cheek. He reached out and gently brushed it away. For a moment, everything slowed, heartbeats, breath time itself. Ava once told me, he murmured, if I ever lost faith in everyone, I should find the person who isn't afraid of the dark. I met his eyes. And you think that's me? You're the only one I've ever seen who dares to look straight into the past. He said it softly, but his eyes didn't lie. They carried both the storm and its quiet after. The space between us narrowed, and for a heartbeat, I felt his breath graze my skin. Smoke, coffee, and something dangerously human. Then he stepped back as if afraid of himself. I can't afford to be weak. Who says being weak is wrong? I whispered. Ethan didn't answer. He just looked at me for a long time as if trying to memorize my face, then turned away. Get some sleep, Emma. Tomorrow, everything changes. Back in my room, my heart still hadn't calmed. On the table under the dim light, the necklace still lay against my skin, glimmering faintly, like an old wound that never healed. 15 years ago, I'd promised a dying girl that I would live. Tonight, in the penthouse of a man burdened by power and grief, I finally understood living isn't just surviving. It's keeping a promise. And somehow I knew from that very moment my fate and Ethan Miller's had become intertwined, bound together by a thread thinner than breath, yet impossible to break. February in New York was so cold, the wind felt like it carried blades. From the glass wall on the 40th floor, I watched the streams of headlights below veins of light running through the body of the city, chaotic and alive, where no one truly knew who was living and who was merely hiding. And I, a woman hiding inside a mafia boss's penthouse, wasn't sure which side of that line I belonged to. It had been 3 days since Ethan found the lead on Roberto Lang. Since then, he'd barely spoken. He vanished into phone calls, private meetings, whispered conversations where I caught fragments of strange names. Marco, Salerno, North Pier. Each time his face grew darker, as if every piece of news carved another wound into something he used to believe in. I tried to keep myself busy brewing coffee, tidying up, letting old jazz records fill the cold air. But between songs in the silence, I could hear the quiet pulse of fear threading through every breath. The necklace around my neck wasn't just a keepsake anymore, it was a mark. A thing that kept me alive, and one that could just as easily get me killed. That afternoon, Ethan came home. No tailored suit this time, just a black sweater collar, high shadows under his eyes from sleepless nights. In his hand, a thick envelope damp from the fog. He set it on the table without a word. I waited, not wanting to break the stillness first. Finally, he looked up. I found him. His voice was hoarse low, cracking with exhaustion. Castor Vega Num, the man who hired him. Roberto Lang. I held my breath. He's in Chicago. New name, new life. For 15 years, he's kept quiet contact with the old Miller Foundation board. Why would he do that? Because he wanted everything. My father trusted him, signed over most of the shares. Ava's death was a warning, a way to force me to kneel. When I didn't, he disappeared. He threw the folder on the table. A photo slipped out, a middle-aged man, eyes gentle yet sly. I'm going to Chicago. Alone. There's no one else I trust. He didn't look at me when he said it, but I knew exactly what that meant. I knew what it was to be betrayed by someone you believed in. That night, I heard him in his office. A low voice, curt sentences, the faint metallic sound of a gun being loaded. I stepped quietly into the hallway and peered through the half-open door. He was cleaning his handgun, methodical, precise, terrifyingly calm. Beside him lay a photo of Ava and a large map of Chicago, crisscrossed with red markings. He looked up. Our eyes met. You shouldn't be here, and you shouldn't be doing that. If I don't, who will? He stood, stepping close enough that I could see the faint stubble he hadn't bothered to shave, Emma. I don't kill out of hatred. I kill to end it. End what? The obsession. A long silence fell. Then he turned away, voice softening. If you're afraid, you can leave tomorrow morning. I'll have someone take you somewhere safe. My chest tightened. And let you destroy yourself alone. He gave a quiet laugh. One without a trace of warmth. I destroyed myself 15 years ago. I couldn't sleep. All I could see were his eyes filled with both darkness and something else I couldn't name. I remembered the first time he held my hand when we ran from the hotel that night, his grip cold but firm, not to control, but to make sure I wouldn't disappear. Now I understood Ethan wasn't afraid of dying. He was afraid of losing someone again. The next morning, I woke early. The pale sunlight spilled through the windows, thin, distant. Ethan was gone. On the table, a small note. Don't go outside. Don't trust anyone. If I don't return in 3 days, find Ryan at Brooklyn Dock. He'll know what to do. The paper smelled faintly of gunpowder. My hands trembled as I folded it. Around noon, as I stood on the balcony, the doorbell rang. I froze. No one but Ethan knew I was here. A second ring. Then a man's voice, deep, carrying a faint Italian accent. Open up, Emma. I'm a friend of Ethan's. My pulse spiked. How did he know my name? The voice came again, softer, amused. You don't need to be afraid. I just have a message for you. I looked through the peephole. A tall man in a long coat. Silver hair, a faint smile. Not Roberto, but those eyes cold greenish blue, and the snake tattoo curling around his neck. I froze. Vega. The pounding began harder this time. You think you can hide? He can't protect you forever. The lock held, but not for long. I ran to the study, heart racing. Ethan always kept something in the drawer. I'd seen the glint of steel once before. My hands found it, a small gun, cold and heavy. The door splintered open with a crash. I aimed, my arms shaking. Stay back, Vega laughed, stepping forward. Just like the little girl that night, trembling but still trying to save someone. Too bad. He raised his hand, a flash of metal. A gunshot split the air. Then silence. I opened my eyes. Vega lay on the floor, a bullet lodged in his shoulder. Ethan stood in the doorway, gun still smoking, eyes made of ice. I told you not to open the door. He crossed the room, pulled the gun from my hand, tossed it aside. Vega groaned, smirking through the pain. Too late, Miller. Lang knows the girl's alive. He's waiting for you in Chicago. Ethan raised his gun again. But I caught his wrist. Don't. You'll kill what's left of yourself. His hand trembled. Our eyes locked, a storm of rage and restraint. Finally, he stepped back, lowering the weapon. Call the team. Take him alive. I need him breathing. When Vega was taken away, Ethan stood by the window for a long time. The sunset spilled gold over his shoulders, outlining the exhaustion etched into his face. I stepped closer softly. What will you do now? Go to Chicago. End this. And me? You're coming with me. I froze. Are you sure I don't want... You don't have a choice anymore. They know who you are. If I leave you here, they'll come back. He turned, took my hand, his grip firm, his voice barely above a whisper. I've already lost someone I loved. I won't let it happen again. I looked at him, warmth and fear tangled inside me like a knot. Maybe in this whole war of vengeance, the most dangerous weapon wasn't the gun in his hand, but the feeling growing quietly in my chest, something I knew I shouldn't have. Outside, the sun slipped below the skyline. In his eyes, the darkness gleamed like metal. And inside my heart, a flame flickered to life, small, fragile, yet bright enough to lead us both into the most dangerous place of all the past. I never thought a journey could begin in such absolute silence. The black car sped through the night rain, streaking across the windshield, like faint scars carved into the city's skin. Ethan sat beside me, eyes fixed ahead, fingers locked around the steering wheel. He didn't speak, and I didn't ask. The distance between us was only inches, yet it felt like an ocean with no name stretched in between. After the Vega incident, Ethan changed cars, changed routes, and cut nearly all contact with the outside world. He said Chicago was the only place where answers could be found, but I knew it was also where he could lose everything. And me? I could only follow a witness to his past, and strangely a mirror of his present. We arrived at a lakeside villa near Lake Michigan at dawn. The house stood vast in transparent walls of glass, surrounded by pines and water. The wind swept across the lake, carrying a low, ghostly hum that sounded like the sighs of old souls. "You'll stay here," Ethan said, setting down my bag. "And you, I'm going to meet someone." Someone, I looked at him. Lang's former accountant. He handled the transfers to Vega. He spoke quietly, efficiently, as if every extra word would be too heavy to bear. Then he left, leaving me alone in a glass house, where everything reflected itself. Even the loneliness that lived in me. In the morning, I walked by the lake. Mist drifted over the water, soft and white. Through it, I thought I saw a figure, a man standing at the edge of the woods, motionless, watching me. When I blinked, he was gone. Only the sound of wind remained, and a faint chill at my neck, as if someone had brushed their fingers over my necklace. I went back inside. On the table was a note written in Ethan's familiar, sharp hand. "If you see anyone unfamiliar near the property, don't go outside. They're not mine. E." My hands trembled as I held it. He didn't have to write the last line, but I heard it anyway in my mind. "I don't want to lose you." That evening, he returned. The lights from the fireplace flickered over his tired face, but there was something alive in his eyes, the kind of light that comes when someone finally touches a truth. "I know where Lang's hiding," he said, shaking rain from his coat. "What will you do?" "Bring him into the light." "How?" I asked quietly. He looked at me, the corner of his mouth lifting in a faint, cold smile. "Justice doesn't always need a courtroom." I understood. And that was what terrified me most. He sat near the fire, holding his hands to the warmth. In the glow, his face softened, edges blurred by the flicker. "Emma, do you ever wish the past had never happened?" I shook my head. "If it hadn't, we wouldn't be here." He studied me, his expression shifting. "You're not afraid of me, I am. But I'm more afraid of losing you." The words slipped out before I could stop them. The room froze. Ethan didn't react at first. After a few seconds, he exhaled, his voice rough, quiet. "Don't trust me, Emma. I'm not someone worth trusting." "I don't trust you," I said softly, clearly. "I trust what's left of you." The firelight flickered across his gray eyes, turning them into ash, cold and fragile. He said nothing, only lifted a hand gently, brushing my hair aside, so light it felt like he feared breaking something fragile between us. That night, I heard him talking in the next room. His voice was low, tense. "No, Ryan. Let them think I'm still in New York. I need a few more days. If I don't come back, she's the only one who knows the truth." I held my breath in the hallway, chest tightening. She, that meant me. And the truth, whatever it was, he was willing to die to protect it. The next morning, rain again. When I woke, Ethan was gone. Only his phone remained on the table, its screen lit with a message he hadn't opened. "Lang knows. Be careful. There's a traitor inside." Before I could process it, a sound came from outside, footsteps slow and deliberate. The glass door slid open. A man in a black suit stepped in, holding a silenced pistol. "Ms. Brooks?" he asked politely, voice smooth and low with a faint Italian accent. "Where's Ethan? He's not here." I backed away. "A shame. Mr. Lang would like to see you." He moved closer, but before he could touch me, the back door burst open. Ethan stood there, coat-drenched eyes made of ice. A gunshot cracked through the air. The intruder dropped blood blooming across the glass floor like red ink. "Did you kill him?" I whispered, trembling. "No, he's still breathing." Ethan pulled out his phone, speaking sharply. "Clean up, bury him deep." He ended the call and turned to me. "I told you, trust no one but me. You're turning me into a prisoner, Ethan." "No, I'm keeping you from the hell I built." His voice was low, almost pleading. I stepped back, tears stinging. He closed the space between us, hands gripping my shoulders. "You think I want this? Every time I look at you, I see Ava. I see that night. If you die, I won't survive it. But living like this, isn't that the same as dying?" He let go, stepping back. And in that moment, I saw him collapse, not in body, but in spirit. "I know," he murmured. "And that's what terrifies me most, that I'm turning you into someone like me." That night, I sat by the glass wall, watching the rain slide down in long streaks. In my reflection, my eyes no longer looked the same. They carried a trace of his gray woven into mine. I realized this house wasn't just a refuge. It was a glass prison, one that held us both. He trapped by his past, and I trapped by the man I couldn't walk away from. Outside, the lake gleamed black as a mirror, and in the fragile silence between raindrops, I knew peace was only an illusion, a brief mercy the storm grants before it returns. Morning over Lake Michigan was veiled in a dull gray, the light fractured by mist and the metallic sheen of water. I sat by the window, hands wrapped tightly around a cup of coffee, watching Ethan's reflection blur across the glass. He was on the phone, voice low and tightly restrained, but I caught every word. "No movement. Hold your position. Wait for my signal." Every time he spoke in that tone, I was reminded that I lived between two worlds, one of light and one of darkness. And he was the man who carried both. When Ethan turned back, I asked, "You're leaving again, aren't you?" "I have to. Lang's on the move. He knows Vega's been taken." "Have you talked to the police?" He gave a faint, humorless laugh, eyes flicking toward me as if I'd said something naive. "If they could have done anything, Ava wouldn't be dead." I stayed silent. Some pain doesn't need explanation. He stepped closer, lowering his head slightly, his hand brushing my shoulder. "Emma, you have to trust me. One last time. Trust that you won't kill anyone," I asked, meeting his gaze. "Trust that I'll survive to come back." That answer made my heart twist. He left, carrying the scent of smoke and cold air with him. The door closed and the house sank back into its familiar silence, the kind that could cage a person better than chains. I tried to fill the hours cleaning, reading a few pages, but my mind kept drifting to him. Every time the phone rang, my pulse spiked, but there was no word from Ethan. By nightfall, when the lake lights shimmered on the glass walls, I saw a figure emerge from the trees. Not him. It was Ryan, the man Ethan once mentioned. Ethan asked me to check in. He said, his voice deep and rough. He wouldn't like it if you got into trouble. I nodded, letting him in. Ryan had the face of a man who'd seen too much cold, but not cruel. He set his phone on the table and played a recording. "If I don't come back, get her out, take her to Boston. Someone will meet you there, don't tell her." Ethan's voice rough, certain. A chill ran down my spine. "When was that recorded? 3 hours ago?" Ryan replied. He went alone. Probably close to Lang now. "Did he say where an abandoned warehouse in the old industrial district?" "I'm not sure you want to hear the rest." "Tell me." Ryan hesitated, then spoke slowly. "There are rumors Vega's dead in custody, and Lang knows you're the one Ethan's been protecting. He wants both of you gone." The room spun. I grabbed the edge of the table to keep from falling. "I have to go." "No, you don't understand, Lang. I don't need to. I just need to reach Ethan." He started to argue, but my eyes stopped him. Finally, he sighed and tossed me a coat. If you die, he'll kill me in his dreams. Rain poured hard as we left the villa. The road to the industrial zone gleamed under the headlights, slick as glass. By the time we arrived, the air was thick with rust and oil. In the shadows, figures moved silent, precise. Lang's men. Ryan whispered, gripping his gun. If you want to live, stay in the car. But I didn't listen. I opened the door, stepping into the cold mud, my heart hammering so fast it hurt. In the distance, through the flickering lights, I saw Ethan. He was on his knees, hands bound, blood trailing from his lip. Before him stood a silver-haired man, Roberto Lang. You killed a child, Ethan said, voice hoarse but steady. Lang chuckled, circling him slowly. No, Ethan. I saved your father's empire. You never understood emotion makes you weak. Emotion is what keeps me human. Lang tilted his head. The smile faded. And it's what will kill you tonight. I didn't think. I ran forward and shouted, Stop! All eyes turned toward me. Ethan froze. Lang's laughter returned, cruel and amused. He gestured for his men to grab me. Ah, the little teacher, the reason he hesitates. Let her go! Ethan roared, his voice breaking. Lang watched him for a long moment, then drew his gun. Choose, Ethan, the girl or the truth. Kill me and she dies with me. Spare me and she walks free. Time stopped. I saw everything in Ethan's eyes. Conflict, pain, and a love so desperate it broke me. Ethan, I whispered. Don't choose me. Choose to live. He gave a faint smile, brief but aching. I already did, Emma. 2 gunshots rang out. Not 1, 2. Lang fell first. Then Ethan, staggering, then collapsing beside me, blood blooming through his shirt like a crimson flower in the rain. I fell to my knees, catching him in my arms. Ethan, look at me. It's me. His hand found mine, trembling, weakening. I promised I'd protect you. Don't promise just stay alive. He gave a broken laugh, breath coming fast. I never believed in anything. Until you. I cried rain tears, everything blurring together. Somewhere in the distance, sirens wailed. Ryan must have called for help. Don't close your eyes, Ethan. He opened them, gray, fading to soft silver, like dawn on still water. If I die, live for me. Remember, Ava made you promise that. No, Ethan, don't, Emma. His voice faltered. I love you. And then his breath dissolved into the rain. I don't remember much after that. Shouting, flashing lights, hands pulling me away from him. I screamed, but they held me back. Ethan was lifted onto a stretcher, face pale, but I swear I saw his fingers twitch. A tiny movement, the faintest pulse of life. By morning, the hospital was washed in sterile white. Ryan sat in the corridor. Arm bandaged, eyes hollow. He's alive, he said quietly. The bullet grazed his heart. Miraculous. I sank into a chair, crying and laughing all at once. But when I entered Ethan's room, the laughter faded. He lay still beneath the machines, pale against the sheets. I realized then nothing would ever be the same again. The man before me wasn't just someone forged by darkness, but a soul suspended between 2 worlds. And I was the reason he'd chosen to keep breathing, even if only barely. I sat beside him, taking his hand. Outside, the gray sky was turning faintly blue dawn, pressing through the hospital window. I whispered for him, or maybe for myself. If love lives on the edge between blood and light, then I choose to stay. Even if that place holds nothing except you. The rain drummed on the hospital roof, a steady rhythm, like the heavy heartbeat of someone fighting not to break apart. I sat beside his bed, watching the monitor pulse in green. Every beep reminded me that he was still here, fragile, real, suspended between pain and survival. Ethan had been unconscious for 2 days since surgery. The doctor said the bullet had only grazed his heart, but the blood loss and shock had been severe. I hadn't left his side, terrified that if I looked away, he might disappear like the wind on that stormy Chicago night. On the 3rd night, the hallway lights cut across his face through the glass. Half in light, half in shadow, I placed my hand over his cold, unmoving. You once said you weren't afraid of dying, I whispered. But you forgot. Someone's afraid of losing you. The wind hissed through the window, cold and sharp, carrying with it flashes of that bloody night. The gunfire, the scream, his final look before collapsing, peaceful as if he'd finally found what he'd been chasing. I must have fallen asleep against the bed. When I opened my eyes, he was awake, looking at me. His gray eyes were tired, but still carried that quiet light that made my heart tremble. You. Hard to sleep when someone's staring at you like that, he murmured. His voice was hoarse, faint, but still threaded with that familiar stubbornness. I laughed through tears. You should rest. If I sleep, you'll start crying again. You always make people worry. Then I guess I'm still alive, huh? I nodded, unable to speak, because in that moment I only wanted to believe his life was real, not something fate had loaned me for a while. 2 days later, Ethan was moved to a private room. He was weak, but his gaze had changed the gaze of someone who'd seen hell and still chosen to return. Ryan came to visit carrying a thick envelope. He set it on the table, looked at me briefly, then turned to Ethan. Lang's dead, but it's not over. Someone else was behind him. One of your own men, a traitor. Ethan's hand gripped the rail of the bed. Who? Not sure yet. But there's a money transfer from your New York fund to Mexico right after Vega's capture. The signature is Vincent Hale's. The room fell silent. Vincent, his most trusted man, the one who'd saved his life during last year's ambush. I remembered that face, calm, loyal, almost too loyal. I want to see him, Ethan said. You can't. He's vanished. And you, Ryan looked at me. You should get out of here. No, Ethan's voice cut through firm. She stays. Ryan started to protest, but Ethan's stare silenced him. When the door closed, we were alone again. He leaned back against the pillow, voice low. If Vincent betrayed me, he knows everything. About Ava, about you. He won't stop. What will you do? End him before he ends us. I looked at him, fear and pity tangled inside me. He was alive, yes, but not reborn. He was a wounded beast awake again to the scent of vengeance. Ethan, you can't kill anymore. His eyes hardened, steel glinting. I don't have a choice. That night I went to Ryan. If you know where Vincent is, tell me. Emma, don't get involved. If you don't tell me, Ethan will go after him himself. And you know what that means. Ryan sighed long and deep before pulling a note from his jacket, an address scrawled in pencil. A warehouse. Outskirts of Chicago. If you go alone. Don't let him know. I arrived near midnight. The wind cut through rows of metal containers, thick with the scent of rust and oil. Inside the warehouse, dim yellow light spilled over Vincent's face. He stood waiting, glass of whiskey in hand, smiling, calm as ever. I knew you'd come, Emma. Why did you betray him? Betray? He laughed softly. I was the loyal one. But Ethan forgot. Power isn't something you share. He grew weak. And you made him weaker. Did you kill Ava? No. But I brought Vega to Lang. The rest, Ethan wrote himself. The words chilled my blood. He trusted you. That's what made him so easy to break. I reached for my phone, but he saw it. In an instant, he drew his gun. You shouldn't have come here alone. The click of the safety echoed, but before he could fire a shot rang out from behind. Vincent staggered, blood blooming across his shirt. Ethan stood in the shadows, gun raised, eyes hollow. I knew you'd be here, he said quietly. You always talk before you kill. Vincent's lips twisted into a faint, broken smile. You've become the very thing you hated, Ethan. Then he collapsed the concrete slick with red. I turned to Ethan, torn between fear and heartbreak. You followed me. I knew you'd come, he said, voice rough. And I won't let anyone take you again. You don't have to save me by killing. If I don't kill, they'll kill you. I looked into his eyes and saw not just darkness, but myself reflected there, small and lost. You're burying yourself, Ethan. I know. He exhaled slowly, but at least I'll bury myself with the truth. We left the warehouse as dawn broke. Fog hung low, the world between gray and white, neither alive nor dead. Ethan drove in silence, hands trembling faintly on the wheel. I watched him, those gray eyes, no longer cold, only exhausted. What now? I asked. Now. There's no one left to kill. He said it like a confession. Outside, the sun rose weak and pale, unable to wash the blood from his hands. I think I whispered Ava never wanted revenge. She wanted you to live. He looked at me so long I forgot to breathe. And you, Emma? What do you want? I want you to stop killing and learn how to forgive. He didn't reply. Then slowly he reached out and took my hand. For the first time since we met, his hand wasn't cold. If I can, he whispered, then teach me how to live. I didn't answer, just squeezed his hand tighter. Because after all the blood and darkness, I finally understood Ethan Miller's hardest battle wasn't against his enemies. It was against himself. A month after the shooting, Chicago thawed. The city felt washed clean, morning mist rising over Lake Michigan, turning everything into a mirage. I stood by the penthouse window, where Ethan sat, his shoulders blocking half the dawn light. His wounds had healed, but he was no longer the man I once knew. No more eyes sharp as steel, no more quiet bursts of rage. Only stillness dangerous in a different way, the stillness of someone who's lost direction. He didn't speak about Vincent or Lang or anything that had happened. His entire world had shrunk to two things: an old piano and me. You're not going back to New York? I asked softly, pouring him coffee. He looked up. His hair was tousled, a faint halo forming where the light touched him. There's nothing left for me in New York. Your company, your home, your whole life. All of it was built on blood, Emma, he interrupted, voice low but gentle. I won't go back to a place where every brick carries a dead man's name. I stayed silent because I understood. Some buildings stand tall yet are made entirely of ashes inside. So what will you do now? He shrugged, eyes distant beyond the glass. Maybe learn how to live. Like you said. A faint smile crossed his lips, so rare it made my chest ache. I didn't know if I had changed him or if he was simply pausing on the edge of the abyss to breathe. But one thing was certain: for the first time, Ethan Miller was truly alive. That afternoon, I went out for groceries. When I came back, he was still at the piano. The melody he played wasn't perfect. It faltered uncertain, yet somehow it was the most human sound I'd ever heard. What are you playing? I asked. I don't know, he said with a small smile. Just something I remember Ava used to hum. He stopped, his eyes dimming. She used to sing when it rained. Her voice was thin, fragile. But every time I heard it, I felt like everything could be forgiven. I sat down beside him. You don't need to forgive the past, Ethan. Just forgive yourself. He looked at me. That look made me forget how to breathe. And if I don't deserve forgiveness, then live like someone who's trying to earn it. Silence. Then he gently placed my hand on the piano keys, his voice barely above a whisper. Teach me, Emma. I smiled. I'm not a music teacher. That's fine. Just stay. The sound that followed was clumsy, uneven, yet beautiful in its imperfection. Because beneath those scattered notes, I could feel his heart learning how to beat again. 3 weeks later, Ethan received an unmarked envelope. He stood by the window for a long time after opening it. What is it? I asked. He turned, his eyes caught between calm and disbelief. A copy of Ava's case file. The police found an old surveillance recording. You watched it, yes. And Ava didn't die right away. Someone saved her, a man named Franco. He took her out of the city. I froze. You mean she lived? Not for long. Franco said she passed away a year later in Italy. But at least she didn't die in their hands. His voice cracked on the last word. His hand trembled just slightly, but enough. You waited 15 years for this, I said. And now I don't know what to do with it. He dropped the paper and stepped onto the balcony. The sunset spilled across his shoulders, painting the scars on his neck in crimson light. You know, Emma, I thought finding Ava's killer would set me free. But maybe what I needed wasn't the truth, it was closure. I joined him by the railing. And now you have it. Maybe. He smiled faintly. But sometimes I fear that without hate, I won't know who I am. Then let love define you instead. He looked at me long enough to stop time. Love. he repeated softly. I never thought I could. I whispered, You already are. Then, between the wind and the scent of the lake, he leaned in and kissed me. It wasn't desperate or possessive, it was slow trembling, as if he were relearning the language of tenderness. Time stopped. And in that fragile stillness, I knew every wound, every drop of blood, every night of fear had led us here to the moment where light finally touched the dark. After that kiss, Ethan changed. He stopped hiding behind glass walls. He began walking outside, sitting by the lake, even smiling at strangers. I watched him laugh with a child in the park, pay for coffee with his left hand because the right one still hurt. And I realized salvation doesn't come from miracles, but from the courage to believe you can still live. One evening, he took me to the pier. I'm leaving Chicago tomorrow, he said. Where to Vermont? I bought land there. I want to build a house. A house, I smiled. You've never stayed long enough anywhere to call it home. Because I never had a reason. Now I do. He looked at me, his eyes so warm they broke my heartbeat. If I said that house is just for two people, you and me, would you believe it? I didn't answer. I just took his hand. And in that quiet moment, I believed not in promises, but in the gentle light shining from a man once consumed by darkness. The next morning, Ethan was gone. He didn't let me see him off. Only a note remained on the table. Don't look for me. When the house is finished, I'll come back for you, if you still want to stay. I held the note smiling through tears. For the first time, Ethan Miller wasn't running away. He was beginning. Outside, the lake was still as glass. The sun rose, gilding the ripples with gold. I looked out across the horizon, hearing the wind whisper his name, and knew that no matter how fierce the storm love would always find its way back to the light. 3 months had passed since the day Ethan left. Summer arrived early in Chicago, sunlight spilling down the old streets, restless yet cold, in the way only a city scarred by loss can be. I had returned to teaching, living quietly, trying to forget the name that had become an ache buried deep beneath my ribs. But sometimes when a piano melody floated out from a cafe window, I would turn, waiting, even though I knew the man I searched for was no longer there. One Saturday afternoon, while I was packing up my students' assignments, Ryan appeared at the classroom door. He wore a white shirt, the old scar still visible on his hand. His face was calm, but his eyes carried something I couldn't read. You're still teaching here, he said, a hint of surprise in his tone. And you still haven't learned to call before you show up. He chuckled softly, glancing around the classroom at the messy art on the walls, the small traces of innocence left in the world. Ethan once told me you were the only person who ever made him believe in this world. Is he all right? I asked, heart quickening. Ryan paused before answering. He's alive. But all right, no. Vermont isn't built for men who've never known peace. I looked down, pretending to organize the books on my desk, hiding the tremor in my hands. Did he say anything about me? He said that when the house was finished, he'd come back for you. And now it's finished. Ryan looked at me. He wants you to come. The train left the station in the gray morning mist. Outside the window, the world shifted, concrete buildings giving way to forests, lakes, and wooden cottages, half hidden in fog. Vermont looked like a painting without sound, so peaceful it made me uneasy. When the car stopped before the house Ryan had described, I froze. A small white cottage windows opening toward the lake. Lavender grew wild around it, filling the air with soft purple fragrance. On the porch stood Ethan. Sunlight filtered through the chontrisen, touching his face, the faint scars on his neck catching the light like traces of a story he no longer tried to hide. You promised you'd come back for me, I said, voice trembling. I was afraid you wouldn't want to go. I stepped up the porch stairs until we stood face to face. Did you really think I could forget no? He smiled faintly. I just hoped you'd learned how to live without me. I looked into his eyes, still gray, but warm now, like ash that had found peace after the fire. I lived, Ethan, but living doesn't mean forgetting. He was silent for a long moment. Then he reached for my hand and led me inside. The house was simple, a piano near the window, a few unfinished paintings leaning against the wall, and the sweet scent of new wood. On the table lay a leather journal. On the first page in neat handwriting were the words, Ava's Promise. You named the house after her, no. After a promise, he said, gaze distant. Ava once told me if I ever found a reason to live again, I should build a place where others could start over. And you did. No, you did. His voice was quiet, rough, but there was something else within it. Tenderness laced with fear, as if he still didn't believe this peace was real. I took his hand, warm, solid, alive. You don't have to carry anyone's promise. Just hold on to yourself. He smiled faintly, his eyes dropping to the necklace at my throat, the same one that had never left me since that night. Ava said whoever wore it would live for her. Maybe she was right. No, Ethan, I shook my head. I'm not living for anyone. I'm living because of you. And in that moment, he pulled me into his arms. The embrace wasn't desperate or demanding, just two souls touching, finally finding the peace they'd thought was lost forever. The days that followed drifted by in a strange, gentle calm. We woke early, made coffee, went fishing by the lake. In the afternoons, he taught me archery. In the evenings, I read to him from books he once feared to open. Sometimes he played the piano while I sat beside him, listening to each note fall like raindrops on the surface of old memories. Once I asked, "Do you still regret it?" "Yes," he answered without hesitation. "But I've learned that regret saves no one. Only the present can." "Then what is your present?" "Ethan? You." He said it softly, but every word felt like warmth against my skin. One moonlit night, he took me to the lakeshore. The wind was cool, the water shimmered with the reflection of 1,000 stars. In his hand was a small box. My heart raced. "Don't be scared," he said, smiling, half teasing, half sincere. "It's not a proposal, just another promise." He opened the box. Inside was a silver ring engraved with the words, "Begin again." Ava told me before she died, don't let anyone else die in your darkness. And you made me see that starting over isn't about forgetting. It's about daring to love again, even when your heart still bears the scars. Tears blurred my vision. He placed the ring in my hand. It's not a bind, just a reminder that someone stayed when I no longer believed I was worth loving. "I didn't choose you out of pity, Ethan," I said, voice shaking. "I chose you because you faced the darkest parts of yourself and didn't run." He smiled, voice low and rough. "Truth is, I just couldn't run anymore. Because you were standing right there." Then he drew me close and kissed me beneath the moonlight. It wasn't the trembling kiss of two broken people. It was the steady, quiet kind of two souls who had already lost everything and finally found each other again. Not to save, but simply to live. The next morning, I woke to find him sitting on the porch, sunlight tangled in his dark hair. He was reading aloud softly as if to himself. "I once lived in darkness, until I realized darkness never truly consumes you if you carry a light within." I walked over and leaned my head on his shoulder. "And if the light goes out, then the person beside you will light it again." We sat there watching the lake ripple with gold. No gunfire, no threats, no vengeance. Just two people once shattered, now whole, sitting together in the rare quiet of life, where love was no longer a storm, but the moonlight that led them home. Autumn arrived in Vermont like a breath, soft, quiet, and impossibly gentle. Morning mist lay over honey-colored hills, and the distant forests had begun to turn a deep, burning red. Ethan's house sat small and peaceful in the valley, a single quiet note, in a world that had once been chaos. When I stepped out onto the porch, he was already making coffee. Light filtered through the curtains, falling across his shoulders, and every slow movement carried a tenderness I'd never tire of watching. He turned, smiling. "You still wake up early, and you still make your coffee too bitter." We laughed, a real laugh untouched by fear or memory. 3 months had passed since Vermont became home. Ethan had learned how to live, and I had learned to believe that even souls once lost in darkness could find their own way back to the light. After breakfast, he took me to the little school, a half-built cabin nestled among the pines. "You said this was your new project?" I asked. "It's more of a legacy," he replied, his voice steady, warm. "A recovery center for children who've suffered violence or loss. I'm calling it Ava's Light." I froze. "You used her name?" "Not just the name, the meaning," he said quietly. Ava wanted to be a teacher. I think if she were still here, she'd help these kids learn not to fear the world. My throat tightened. And now you're doing that for her? No, he said, eyes softening. We are. Sunlight poured through the trees, touching his face. Not the face of the cold mafia boss I'd met once, but of a man who had finally learned how to live in love instead of war. That afternoon, I stood in the empty classroom writing the first words on the board. Ethan sat by the doorway, sketching designs, noting measurements. I watched him, the same man who once lived in blood and violence, now carefully choosing paint colors for children's walls. And I understood true love doesn't save a person. It makes them want to become better. He looked up, catching my gaze. What are you thinking? That maybe Ava was right. About what? That sometimes those who've lost everything are the ones who love the deepest. Ethan smiled faintly, his eyes warm like the last light of autumn. I've lost a lot. But for the first time, I'm not afraid to lose anymore. Why? Because I know that even if everything fades, the light you've left in me will stay. I stepped closer, laying my hand over the old scar on his chest. Light doesn't have to last forever. It just needs to have shone once. He squeezed my hand, his voice quiet but certain. No, Emma. For me, that light has your name. That night we sat on the porch, under a sky full of stars. Neither of us spoke, but the silence no longer frightened me. I rested my head on his shoulder, listening to the wind through the pines and the steady rhythm of his heartbeat, calm, strong, and real. Do you ever think, he asked softly, that people like us can have a normal ending? What's normal? A morning where you wake up and aren't afraid someone will be gone. I smiled. Yes, we're having that right now. He said nothing more. Then gently he kissed my forehead as if afraid to break the fragile beauty of the moment. Thank you for staying when I wasn't anyone at all. I never needed you to be anyone. I just needed you to be real. Late that night, I woke to find him still awake, sitting by the window, staring into the misty sky. I can't stop thinking about Ava, he murmured. I walked over and placed my hand on his shoulder. You don't have to forget her. I'm afraid she'll think I betrayed her. She won't, I said softly. If she could see you now, she'd be proud, because you turned pain into something kind. He looked at me, eyes bright with tears, but peaceful. Maybe, but no one ever taught me how to live with happiness. It feels strange, Emma. Then let me teach you. I took his hand and led him out onto the porch, where moonlight spilled silver over the lavender field. Lesson 1. I whispered, don't run from peace. Stay in it. He smiled, gripping my hand a little tighter. I'm trying, but if you're not here, I'll lose my way again. Then don't let me go. Never. A week later, Ava's light officially opened. The press called it a school built from darkness, but to us, it was simply an apology to the past. During the ceremony, Ethan stood on a small wooden stage before a group of children faces, once shadowed by fear, now glowing in sunlight. He spoke slowly, sincerely. I used to think strength meant feeling no fear, but I've learned that real strength is believing in goodness even after you've seen too much evil. Ava taught me that, and someone else taught me that light never truly disappears. It only waits for someone brave enough to look back. The crowd was silent. I stood among them, tears falling freely, not from sorrow, but peace, because I knew he had finally learned how to live. And in that moment, I could almost see Ava smiling somewhere in the sunlight filtering through the trees. That evening, we returned to our house by the lake. Ethan sat at the piano playing the melody Ava used to sing. But this time, it wasn't sad. When the last note faded, he turned to me and asked softly, Do you think one day every wound can turn into a flower? Yes, as long as you're not afraid to water them. He laughed quietly, then pulled me into his arms. Outside, the wind stirred the forest, carrying the scent of lavender and the warmth of fire from our home. Everything was still, not as an ending, but as a beginning. A new chapter where two souls who had lost everything learned to rewrite what it means to live. Life will always leave scars, but they aren't there to make us ugly. They're there to remind us that we survived. And love is not a miracle. It's the smallest light in the darkest night guiding us back to ourselves. If this story touched you, believe this. Even if darkness once swallowed the world, as long as someone stays out of love, the light will always return. Share this story if you believe everyone deserves to be forgiven once and given one more chance to begin again.